Boards are demanding it. CEOs are announcing it. Vendors are selling it. And in the back of everyone's mind, there's a voice quietly asking the question that's really difficult to answer. Does it actually work? We're deep in the demo era of AI. And the demo era is a dangerous place because, well, the demo always works. The demo doesn't impact the bottom line. The demo doesn't have legacy infrastructure. The demo doesn't have a compliance officer who just got back from a conference with 17 new questions. The demo is not the point. The demo is what happens after. That's the point. Today on Breaking Banks, we're having the conversation the vendor decks don't prepare you for. I've got two guests who've been on both sides of this. Prashant Mehrotra from US Bank, who lives inside the institutional reality every day, and John Sun from Spring Labs, who's building the technology that has to survive contact with reality. Between them, they've watched enough AI pilot launches and quietly die to know the difference between transformation and theater. We're going to talk about why AI feels inevitable and unmanageable at the same time. Why fear is driving more adoption decisions than strategy, and where, underneath all the noise, AI is actually delivering value without anyone issuing a press release about it. Because here's the thing. The most important AI deployments in banking right now, you've never heard about them. And that's the point. This podcast is powered by US Bank, and it was recorded live at the FinTech Exchange by the University of Utah. Contrary to popular belief, this episode is not generated by AI. These are real characters, flesh and blood here. Pleased to have John Sun, one of the co-founders and CEO of Spring Labs, and Prashant Mehrotra, who is the Chief AI Officer from US Bank, is recording live from the FinTech Exchange, sponsored by US Bank, as we give the hottest takes around FinTech. Let's actually start with what I think will be a hot take, and I appreciate the honest opinions. Have we reached the point that AI is beginning to matter in the commercial sense, or are we still actually in the figuring it out mode that is not driving the outcomes yet? Prashant, let's start with you.
That's a really good question. Has it started to matter in a commercial sense? I would say the answer is yes. It's also a question of scale.
Yes. Okay.
Right? How much? Right? I mean, what percent of GDP? What percent of commercial output? But has it started to make a difference? Is there a level of hype?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But if you look at, or if you hear the quarterly earnings report, not just from technology company, but from banks, from other companies, you will hear examples after example of them starting to use and see measurable difference. So I would say my answer in that is we are far from where it is in every single part of your commerce or life, but it is making a difference.
John, I'm curious from your perspective, how much of the clients that Spring Labs is engaging with, are they even ready for it to make the difference to scale? Prashant talked about, or are they themselves in the exploratory phase? They don't want it to be that large of a commercial impact.
Yeah, it's changed so much from year to year. So I think when we had kind of first started what we're doing back in 2024, there were a lot of exploratory kick the tire conversations and exercises that kind of didn't really lead too much. Whereas today, I think the sales cycle is compressed quite a bit because of this kind of readiness to buy and readiness to kind of install. I think for a lot of our early customers, we were probably the first AI product that they had bought and installed and gotten any value from. And now I think we're frequently kind of, sometimes that still happens. We're still kind of the first for a lot of our clients. But sometimes they've already kind of installed a number of these AI projects, done AI transformation, exposed internal tooling for AI. We had one client that had their own set of MCP servers that revealed company documents to their employees' ChatGPT instances. So I think you're seeing day by day the adoption is starting to kind of ramp up quite nicely.
So One of the hesitations we heard a lot about early on was regulatory pressure and this fear of a black box. And it really, I get this sense, and then tell me if this is true, that was kind of a false flag, really a fear culturally and otherwise that we use that as the reason not to do things. Have we overcome that hurdle? Where do you see the hurdles now that we're not leaning further into AI? Sean, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Look, I think the regulatory concerns are real. Keep in mind, this thing burst in on the scene, and I'm talking Gen AI, right?
Yep.
And OpenAI released version 2 like a couple years back before 22, right? This thing burst into the scene. It really got general consumers interested in it. Companies, enterprise software, enterprise technology landscape is slightly different, right? It takes more, more work to, get that adopted. And folks are trying to figure out how does this work in an overall regulatory environment. And and I would say things have gotten a little better. There is a definite recognition of this is a transformation that's going to happen. This is something we need to not just watch out and see what where we are or what it will do. It's like let's try to figure out how to adopt math.
And how is US Bank's approach to this evolve? Because you have a center of excellence around it, and it feels, observing from the outside as closely as I know a bunch of US Bank, it went from kind of like a specialty, that you led to something that touches everything. How has it evolved within the organization?
Yeah, look, one of the things I actually say about AI is I believe, and I'll say, I hate the leadership shares the optimism, and the viewpoint is this is a transformational force. So it's not you cannot actually think about transformation only in one small part of the organization or to one small part of the organization driving it. We need to bring everybody along the journey. So we started as we are a center of excellence. We started a center of excellence, but our job is to get everybody ready and everybody be ready to get onto that journey.
Okay.
And it requires a lot of evangelization, education, enabling them to build and use products, and then executing as one too.
John, from your perspective, because you work with a lot of organizations that are not at the scale of a US Bank, how are they approaching it? Do you have a sense of, I hear a lot of time from us, call it the non-top 20 banks, that they're like, oh, we can't do this kind of all-in approach that US Bank said it's going to touch everything. And so they tend to sequester it. What are you seeing on the front lines?
I think, very early on, we started realizing exactly what Sean was saying, that it's a transformation project, right? I think it touches a lot of things. If you want to actually install AI within an organization, it's going to be a massive undertaking. So we kind of looked at ourselves and we're kind of like, hey, as a startup, I don't think we want a 2 to 3 year sales cycle. So what we're going to do is we're going to carve off use cases that's tangible, that's discrete, that has clear boundaries around it, and that we can deliver ROI for very, very quickly. So I think the first set of use cases that we brought to market were essentially things that looked a lot like replacements for similar existing products, just doing it better, doing it more accurately with higher ROI because of lower costs. And I think that really resonated. So I think, today we very much lean into the AI messaging, but at the beginning, the messaging was kind of, Kevin, my co-founder and our chief revenue officer, and I used to joke, we'd kind of show up to a meeting and we'd feel out whether they want to hear about AI or not. And we'd have a version of the slide deck that had AI in it, and a version of the slide deck that didn't have AI in it. And we'd kind of, adapt the messaging to kind of what, business is looking for. But at the end of the day, I think university, what they're looking for is experience that's, safe and secure and easy to install and delivers quick value and quick ROI.
There's a point I'm going to actually add to the, unlike other technologies that we have adopted or used, if you're using a technology ecosystem, AI is coming to you.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you use Microsoft Office, you use Teams, you use Zoom, you use, you know, pick whatever software or tool that you want to use, whether it's your, SaaS systems or HR system. A lot of these vendors have brought built in, AI features, and they are, those are just generally available.
So, as you look to the future, how much of AI does AI meld into the background because it's embedded in what we do? That we're not even going to think about it as AI anymore. It just actually is delivered as part of the product.
Look, the best technologies just exist.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if if this is truly transformative, it should never feel like you are doing AI. We should just be doing your work. The way I describe it, to my team is, think about AI as everything behind the pane of glass. It's intelligence that is everywhere,
Okay.
all the time. What we need to think about is those experiences and how do we deliver those experiences. We should not be building AI products. Every product should have AI and intelligence driving it. And that's the difference.
And this is why you and Kevin had the two versions. This slide, one is about outcomes, and one is for the group that wanted to hear about AI.
I think that's right. I mean, I think people want to hear about outcomes. I mean, I think there is a bit of a tailwind for AI products these days, just because there is a bit of excitement about it. But I mean, I totally agree. No one talks about themselves as being internet companies or internet startups anymore, right? Because it's become so ubiquitous. It's faded into the product and it's adding value to the product.
Cloud-based.
For cloud-based, exactly. That was a hot thing a few years ago. That kind of has faded out a little bit, right? So I think it's going to happen to AI too. Probably even hopefully in the near future, you're going to have products that just kind of are easy to install and work out of the box and deliver a magical experience, AI or not. And you're going to have products that don't, AI or not.
Well, because AI is such a hot topic, it feels like it's getting added to everything. Like the magic ingredient, right? It's the creativity of, product development right now. Are we finding AI added to things that it doesn't necessarily need? Kind of like everything was going to the blockchain for a while. Or like, does that really need to be a blockchain?
Well, I think some of that will happen. It's practically inevitable, right? And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just one of those things that just happens, and it will over a period of time, it will correct itself. But having said that, just remember, what I said before is you need to have intelligence below the layer driving that.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, what you want your product to do is react fast to your business need. So maybe it's not an AI feature that is being delivered, but maybe AI itself is driving the product experience. And that product experience can actually be customized or suited for your scenario, for your employees, your teams, your customers, like your vendors, all of them. So in some, you will see overt AI. In some, it's just a driving force. But the phrase I subscribe to most is, you need to have that intelligence being part of your operation.
I mean, there's definitely right and wrong ways to install AI.
Sure.
I agree. I think the intelligence needs to be part of your product. I'm not as worried about superficial uses of AI, although, I mean, obviously there are going to be a bunch. There's going to be AI powered toasters and, very superficial uses of AI. And it is kind of what it is a marketing gimmick, but it does no real harm. There are actually harmful ways to install AI. People are trying to use AI to replace things that should not be done with AI. Like, you kind of see this push of like, well, can AI replace some of the use cases that traditionally were in these more difficult to build and maintain machine learning domains, right? And AI is just not the right technology for it. So it can actually harm your product if you install too much AI in the thing instead of leaning on tried and tested traditional technologies. Like it becomes less responsive, it becomes less accurate. And I think that's really the risk here. It's like when you're over-indexing the AI, it's not necessarily superficial uses of AI. There could just be incorrect uses.
Well, let's
of AI.
pull on that for a second, because I think this isn't talked about enough that you hit is there are places where adding AI is actually bad. And you call it the difference between deterministic versus probabilistic applications. Are there areas, Prashant, that you within US Bank say, hey, maybe the chief AI officer, but we need to say, here are the areas or places we need guardrails right now?
Look, first of all, I'll get to that answer. But unlike previous capabilities, generative AI costs every time you use it. There is a cost associated with it.
Yeah.
So if you can actually get something done that's is in a less complex, less number of technologies involved or cheaper fashion, it's our responsibility to make sure we are maximizing the ROI.
Yep.
So let's not use a technology that's going to cost extra bit without any benefits, right? That's one aspect of it. Number two, you want to understand, what complexity it brings in.
Yep.
And then I'll give a super simple example, applies to just about every public company is, we generate our, quarterly and annual earnings reports, right? Do I really need to use AI? Is it mature at that point of time? Or are there better, much more established, much better governed and control ways of doing that? We were talking earlier this morning about that is, look, you can do it in Python. You can do it in your Excel. You can do it in your existing processes and tools. Let's use those and not try to, overtly, I've been an engineer all my life. I've done, I've been part of technology companies is let's not try to over-engineer every single solution. And,
Absolutely.
John, you started talking about some of the use cases where using AI to replace repetitive tasks or things like that. How do you think about and make the judgment where should AI be replacing humans versus keeping human in the loop versus automating? That's kind of my spectrum. I don't know how you guys think about that piece.
So I think we're a big fan of identifying where does the buck stop from a risk ownership perspective. If you're using AI to replace risk ownership, you've gone too far. So the buck stops at a human necessarily. Like you can't tell the regulators I'm blaming my AI model for this. I don't think they're going to take it too well. So I think that's always kind of at least kind of an outline where you shouldn't go past. I think within that space, I think there are a lot of mechanistic things that people are doing. I mean, I was kind of making this point earlier there in the panel. Financial services as a whole has spent 20 years trying to make human judgment in a lot of these tasks go away by turning them into very mechanistic actions. So they become deterministic and predictable. Like, just because now we have the capability to insert agency through models doesn't mean we should. We literally had agency before humans have agency. We could have just had them make more decisions. And we kind of instead decided, hey, like for all of these regulatory purposes, a lot of very, very good purposes, let's kind of put some guardrails around that agency and let's create a guardrail process that we're going to, go down and humans are going to perform mechanistic actions along that process. So those are the perfect places to kind of, have AI agents essentially take over some of that, right?
So along those lines, you said something I think that's important that I want to pull on. How much of AI is an unwillingness to take accountability for decisions? This is the easy way to outsource. You can't tell the regulator, oh, the AI made the decision, but even for the simpler things, how much is it because, it has a cost, but it's relatively invisible to the user, right, that is writing the presentation, but it's easy to make the AI make the judgment versus the individual?
well, I think, John touched on it, is the buck has to stop with a human, right?
Okay.
So human in the loop is our stated, policy. I mean, we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we own that relationship with our clients and our internal employees. Right? So we need to make sure that whatever the decisions are being taken, whatever actions are being taken, they have they have a sense of, we have a sense of ownership on them, and we have a sense of accountability on them. So can we use AI to speed up some of those things and get to that outcome faster? But yes, but ultimately we own those actions and outcomes. I think that's just non-negotiable.
I 100% agree. I think as an organization, if you're using AI because you're kind of avoiding a decision point and putting the decision to the AI, I think you kind of as an organization done a poor job of constructing the right control structure, right? But as humans, like, have you ever had AI pick what restaurant you're gonna eat at?
Absolutely.
Like, I mean, I think as humans, there is that tendency to. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that's kind of a push and pull we always got to watch out for as we're implementing AI systems in kind of these, especially very regulatory sensitive, areas.
Actually, that's a great example, and that's a judgment and that's a decision I'm willing to
Yeah, right.
use all the time.
Well, and let's pull on that thread, because I think that is a great example people can get their head around. But if you think about when you ask the AI for what restaurant to eat at when you're in Salt Lake for the food pack exchange, it's going to take a number of variables into account, but it's going to give you the most likely answer. And part of that, I think there's a couple ways we go with this, is the most likely is not always that interesting outlier. How much of AI do we run the risk of it is bringing us back to a standard or more? Is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because you can say, well, actually, in lending, it's a good thing, but are we losing something, which is understanding the edge cases around it?
That example actually, I like that question, because in that question is also like part of the answer, right? I can give it a detailed spec of where I want to be, what I'm in the mood of, for, and why. Maybe I'm just going by myself, or I'm going by with a bunch of business acquaintances or my family.
Like
And
spicy food, don't like spicy food. Yeah.
So it's the amount of effort I put in is the type of results I get. On the other hand, am I always going to pick up the first option? That's highly unlikely, knowing me. Well, actually, it's highly unlikely knowing me. But but fundamentally, it's what we put in. And one thing we have to remember is I have been interacting with the system for like 3 years now, right? So it actually knows, maybe when I do this in San Francisco, I pick this type of food. Maybe I pick this type of food in Chicago versus New York. So fundamentally, it actually has a model or enough information, background information. So think of these things as getting richer over time based on our interactions.
I mean, yeah, I think you're hitting on one of the frontier questions of AI that's being explored today. Like, one of the biggest, I guess, latest hot button topics within, for example, software development is how AI is affecting open source projects. Because here's the thing. Let's say I'm building something with AI. I'm like vibe coding an app or something like that. And we need to pick a library to do something, right? The AI knows about a certain set of options within its training set, and then knows to kind of go out to the internet and look for libraries that accomplish this thing that you want it to. And it's almost always going to recommend the things with like the most GitHub stars or hypes or whatever it is, right? So now you're running into the situation where, again, if a human developer is outsourcing judgment to this tool, it's always going to revert to the mean of like what's safe, what's proven. How do new open source projects get their footing? Because if you're tilting the scale just even slightly towards like, hey, it's a lot easier for me to just say yes to this thing that's right in front of me, saying like, can I implement this? Yes/no, versus me having to go out there and do a bunch of research. I might look at it and say like, I really should go look at you know what? Go ahead.
Push the button.
Exactly. And that, whether it's a small effect or a large effect, is going to affect the development of new projects, because new projects are necessarily not a part of that set that's going to get recommended.
Actually, that's a really good point. I also bring that back. Sometimes is like, how do developers actually search for that today? Whether it's a restaurant I'm going out to and looking for the ratings, whether a product I'm buying online looking for ratings, or I'm looking for a library
Yeah.
and looking for the GitHub stars, kind of thing. All of that. I mean, we have different type of developers or folks, and they're looking at different things, but the self-reinforcing thing is real. I mean, it's and there's no perfect answer.
Part of this makes me think there's this tension between the generalized intelligent model, right? So kind of one norm that we center around versus building out more context-rich models, right? Like, so if I think about a model built around open source that says, hey, don't over-index on things that are well-established and known. In fact, do the opposite, over-index on the open source and the unknown, right? So it has a richer context. How do we balance the tension between doing, kind of generalized versus a fit for purpose? It's done the work, Prashant, as you've said, to put the work in, to give it that context. And how do organizations balance that? Because it almost becomes an endless task to add the context.
Well, what you're going to, I think some of those we are starting to see, but it's not very broad yet, is you're going to start to see these models. I mean, the moral and the intelligence is going to be there, but they are going to start to build like a context, and they're going to build your personal context, your family context, and in the same way, your company context around it. So if I'm in retail, I might actually, have a different set of, expectations. If I'm in risk, I'm doing it in a certain way. But the richer over the time, what you will see is the context itself will become as important as the intelligence that is driving it. Because as a human, we can be asked the same question in two different contexts. And based on the context, we might actually give different answers. Right? So we have not explored enough of what what that context actually means for.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I think context and memory management is the biggest kind of development with agentic AI right now. Because if you think back, like I want to say a few years ago, but really like a few months ago, everyone was all about RAG, like retrieval augmented generation.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how do we build all of these like complex like embedding and vector database retrievals and re-rankers? And the goal of all of that was, how do I spoon feed the AI model information, right? And lo and behold, a few months later, now we're kind of in the world of kind of finally agentic AI. And I think what a lot of these like coding agents like Cursor and Claude Code and all of these guys have figured out is that, like, hey, you don't need to do that. Like, just give the agents like a simple set of tools, the same set of tools that a human developer would use, like grep and search and, replace and all of these just very basic things, and just let it loose and it kind of can go and do its own thing. So there is still an element of context management and memory management because the context windows are still limited right now. But I think, as there's kind of more model sophistication, I think the frontier research is going to be in that memory and context, management piece of it.
So with machine learning in particular, I think about doing early entrees into that. There's so much foundational work that needed to be done in terms of extracting and cleaning and loading data, that now we can throw AI against ugly data and make it work. In what you just said, John, is AI getting to the point that you just described, that we can overlook the foundational work, that we don't have to make those investments anymore because the AI is that much better?
So we spend a lot of time building machine learning models using AI.
Okay.
And if you look at what the coding agents are doing, it's basically exactly the same thing a human data scientist would be doing. So it's going to start by cleaning and munging the data, and it's going to do that by creating a Python script that essentially kind of takes the noisy data and looks at where the gaps are. It builds into the strip, it cleans the data set up, it normalizes all the data. Exactly the same thing your data scientist is going to be doing. It's just doing it much faster because it can write code at 100x human speed or 1000x human speed. But fundamentally, like if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I mean, that's what these models were trained on, right? The chain of thought on a lot of these coding first models were trained on like what is the activity a data scientist might do, or what is the activity that like a developer might take, the steps a developer might take. So in terms of like, are you getting away from the problem? No, the problem is just being solved for you much faster than what it was before.
And so it doesn't matter. We're still solved. We didn't have
It's
to
still
fix the foundation. We could fix it from the top.
I think there probably is a bit more of a tolerance for just getting a dirty data set and having AI clean it up. Whereas before, you'd probably spend a little more time making sure that the source data was kept in a way that you didn't have to spend a lot of time cleaning it.
Yeah. I'll actually add on to that because that's being from the data side before AI, it's really important. Is for the first time when I think about building a model in the past, right? I'll spend a lot of time in getting the data to a usable format.
Yeah.
I'll spend a lot of time, then a good amount of time in building the model, which ironically was probably less effort than getting the data.
Yeah.
And then I'll actually spend a good amount of time in taking that model and explaining it. For the first time, you have a tool that significantly reduces the work and gets you the data ingestion and pipeline and munging on wrangling much easier. You still have to do model, and guess what? The large language models are able to explain those things better. So that entire pipeline has become much faster and easier.
When we're going to look back, 5 years is probably too far of a timeline and what's going to happen. So let's call it a year, because that actually, given how fast the
6
cycles
months,
are
right,
moving,
right.
a year. What do you think we're going to look back and say we completely overestimated? And what are we going to say we underestimated? Because right now, I'd say, if I look back now to, 6 months ago, a year ago, I think we totally overestimated how important data cleanliness was, and we completely underestimated data availability. I don't know if you guys agree with those. Is like that's what I would posit. But are there other things you think we're going to look back and say we missed on this, either over or under?
Number one, one of the things I was in a panel earlier this morning about agentic AI. We are underestimating how much effort it will take for us to, be more comfortable there. So that's why. I think that data is a very critical piece, and we are still underestimating, what lies inside the data. We have not done we really don't know that with the scale and the speed, velocity of us using that data to drive those models and intelligence, there's a lot of work to be done, bro.
I think we're probably going to underestimate the importance of specific to the modeling process, human intuition. I think right now we're kind of at this place where, writing code with AI has become so easy. People just automatically assume you can build machine learning models with AI as well. There is a reason there's a difference between data scientists and developers. Even though developers would like to think data scientists are just bad developers, that's not what they are, right?
Yep.
There is an element of data intuition. There's an element of connecting what you're seeing in the numbers with what you know about the real world. And I think that's what differentiates data scientists from kind of developers, right? And I don't think that intuition will be picked up by AI yet. It's a little too nuanced, and it requires context that the AI just doesn't have. So I don't know if that changes in a year with like Office 5 or 5.5 or whatever it is. But for now, I feel like, and I've tried this before, that like the difference between a really good data scientist and kind of a run-of-the-mill data scientist is that kind of data intuition.
So I think that's really insightful and really important.
Yeah, totally.
Is that the next exponential leap that we see is, I think of this with my coding hat on. There are those who have really good intuition, right? They write that. You sit and watch them stare at the computer for a while, not writing a line of code. But when they do, their code is simple and elegant, what they've done. And there are some that I've worked with, they're just proliferate, right? Like they write fast, and it might not be perfect code, but they write fast code and it gets the job done, but it's almost a brute force aspect. Is that the final frontier we're talking about in AI? Is when it has the intuition, the elegance that comes with experience? But can it even ever be captured?
Good question.
I am not really sure. I'll have to, say on that one.
Yeah.
Can it ever be captured? We are getting better. These frontier models are getting better and better. I think that's undeniable, right? I think a part of that, I don't know if it will ever get there to the perfect state, because frankly, I don't know if we can actually define what that perfect state is. The goalpost does move a lot. And remember, over the years, I have had interactions with a lot of technical folks and non-technical folks. And I've always thought, like, this is the best one. And then, you find somebody who's better than the last one.
I probably too philosophical of a question on whether it could ever get there, but I think you're right. I think that is kind of what differentiates the folks who are going to add exponential value with AI versus the folks who are going to get replaced by AI. Is kind of that ability to, use kind of it as a tool to kind of carry out some vision and some intuition that you have.
Well, to close, let's end on the very philosophical here, which is at what point the great philosophical text known as Terminator, do machines decide the best choice for us is that AI actually takes over?
Look, I am a strong believer. I started by saying it's a transformative force, and I'll say it's a transformative force for good. Combines didn't take over human beings who were harvesting the farms. I am a very strong believer that this is going to drive the next set of prosperity and not the doing of Terminator.
I would certainly hope so, but I would hope all of our technology development is human first. At the end of the day, like, you can't search for efficiency for the sake of efficiency. It's got to have some purpose, some goal behind it, right? And I think, we can disagree on a lot of things, but I think we have to agree that search for efficiency is for the benefit of humans, that what we develop has to be human first.
That's it for another week of the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. This episode was produced by our US-based production team, including producer Elizabeth Severance, audio engineer Kevin Hersham. If you like this episode, don't forget to tweet it out or post it on your favorite social media, or leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Facebook, or wherever it is that you listen to our show. Those actions help other people find our podcast, and in return, that helps us build an audience that can be supported by sponsorship, so we can continue to provide you with our award-winning content every week. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on Breaking Banks next week.